Welcome to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and today we'll be studying Judges chapter 12. Judges chapter 12 is kind of a finishing up of the story of Jephthah and the things that transpired after he had returned home and had to deal with the fact that his daughter was the first thing that came out of his house, and we dealt with that in chapter 11. But then we're going to move past that now, and we're going to move into the end of his story and a few other judges. It's a fairly short, fairly straightforward chapter with just a couple of extra things to add in and deal with here. So let's go ahead and get started. In Judges chapter 12 and verse 1, "And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward, and said unto Jephthah, Wherefore passedst thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house upon thee with fire." So first of all, I do not understand their reaction here. These people from Ephraim are mad at Jephthah for not calling them up to go fight against the Ammonites. And so their reaction is, hey, why didn't you call us to go fight with you? We're going to burn your house. That's not the reaction that normally, I could say, hey, we're not going to invite you to the next barbecue, my daughter's bar mitzvah or whatever. You're not getting invited to that because you didn't invite us to, but we're going to burn your house down is a big overreaction in my opinion. But basically they accuse him of not inviting him to go fight with them against the Ammonites, and then they're going to say, because of this, we're going to burn your house down. And so now verse 2, Jephthah said unto them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, that is the Gileadites. And when I called you, you delivered me not out of their hands. So Jephthah says, I did call you, and you didn't come help. And so when the Gileadites were in stress from the Ammonites, we sent out word for you to come help, and you didn't come. So I don't get this accusation that you're making against us is essentially what he's saying. Verse 3 says, And when I saw that you did not deliver me, I put my life in my hands and passed over against the children of Ammon, and Yahweh delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are you come up unto me this day to fight against me? So he's like, what gives here? Why are you coming up against me now? I did call you. I did ask for your help, and you didn't come. And so then I took matters into my own hand and went and fought. And of course we know the whole story from 10 and 11, what actually happened. But he's basically telling the people from Ephraim, I did ask for help and you didn't come. So now why are you coming at me like this, saying that I didn't invite you to come fight with the Ammonites? And on top of that, why are you threatening to burn down my house because of it? That makes no sense. So it says in verse 4, Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. So this comes to blows. The talking back and forth very quickly here devolves into just fighting over it, because apparently the people from Ephraim were hot-headed and wanted to burn his house for not getting invited to the fight. Again, that makes no sense to me, but then nothing that the Israelites ever does makes much sense to me anyway, because all the rebellion and constant bickering and whatever that they do, instead of just trusting in God, makes no sense. But here we are. So they fight against Ephraim, and the men of Gilead smote Ephraim, because they said, You Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim, among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. So Ephraim, to basically trying to get these guys back in the fold, I guess. Maybe this is obviously some kind of minor civil war here. The people from Ephraim are telling the Gileadites, which is a subsection of Ephraim, that you guys are fugitives. You guys are separating yourselves out from us, trying to take matters into your own hands. And so there's this constant back and forth here about, why didn't you invite us? Well, I did invite you. You guys are just fugitives. You're trying to take matters into your own hands. No, we're not. We invited you. You didn't come. And so there's this nonsense that the people from Ephraim are going on about, and Jephthah obviously is like in the right, and he is able to defeat them. He's a mighty man. He's very powerful. God is with him, and so he is able to overcome these guys who are attacking him. And so in verse 5 it says, the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites, and it was so that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, let me go over, that the men of Gilead said unto him, are you an Ephraimite? If he said no, then they said unto him, say now Shibboleth. And he said Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. And they took him and slew him at the passages of Jordan, and there fell at that time of the Ephraimites 42,000. So you have this battle, and the Gileadites under Jephthah take these passes. And when the fighting would die down, people would try to pass through that were part of this army from Ephraim. And because remember, Manasseh is on both sides of these mountains. And so Ephraim and Manasseh, these are the two sub-tribes that descended from Joseph. They're kind of tightly bound here at this time, and the Ephraimites would try to pass through these passes, and there was a very simple thing that the people under Jephthah would do to prevent that from happening. They would ask them to say a word, and because of the different region that they found themselves in, because of the differences in dialects, I guess, there was a word that the people from Ephraim could not pronounce well, which was this idea of shibboleth. And they would pronounce it, they wouldn't say the sh part of it, they would just say sibboleth. And because they couldn't pronounce the word, it was easy to determine who was actually from Ephraim, and so they would be killed. And during all of this fighting, you have 42,000 people from Ephraim, men fighting for Ephraim, that were killed. And one of the accusations that comes up from time to time is when you go back and you look at Genesis through Deuteronomy, and you look at the numbers that are there, the thousands of men who were of fighting age. It's over 600,000 men of fighting age. People want to say, well, those numbers couldn't be possible. Those numbers are too big. Let's knock off a zero, and it's arbitrary. They're just doing that. But then you have here again this idea of 42,000 men, and so you have to accept that, hey, if I'm going to change it there, I've got to change it here. There's no reason why these numbers aren't reasonable numbers, other than just the whim of people saying, well, man can't reproduce that fast. And I've already gone over that. But you have 42,000 men here that die from Ephraim, but there's still plenty of men left to continue to try, because we read about it further on for the rest of the Old Testament. So that brings us to the end of Jephthah's reign. It says, and Jephthah judged Israel 6 years, then died Jephthah the Gileadite, and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. And so his time as a judge ends, and that brings us to the next judge. And this last part here of the chapter, like I said, it's a relatively short chapter, so this is going to be a somewhat short video, is just kind of a listing of these different judges. And there's not too much information contained in these texts, nothing of great significance here, but it does give us not only a continuation of the line, and gives us an idea of the chronology that happened between Joshua and Samuel, the time of the coming of Samuel and King Saul. But it just gives us that kind of filler. There's over 300 years that take place between those 2 points in time, and so this gives us that continuity. So verse 8 says, and after him Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel, and he had 30 sons and 30 daughters. See, again, we see very large families, huge families, and again, those big numbers, 42,000 men dying, 600 and something thousand men coming, fighting men coming out of Egypt. Those numbers are not unreasonable, because we're seeing here families of 60 children, right? And when you look at Exodus chapter 1 and how many times the wives, the midwives and the women were blessed with fertility, these numbers are not absurd at all. They're perfectly reasonable, considering these kinds of things. So he had 30 sons and 30 daughters whom he sent abroad, and took in 30 daughters from abroad for his sons, and he judged Israel 7 years. Okay, so we have this continuity, this chronology here of him judging 7 years. And then died Ibzan and was buried at Bethlehem. So after Jephthah, you have Ibzan. So there's 6 years for Jephthah, 7 years for Ibzan, and that time period goes on. And then it says, and after, and after, and after. And so we can put here a chronology here. And then verse 11, and after him, Elon, a Zebulunite. This is not Elon Musk of modern fame, but Elon, a Zebulunite, judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. And Elon, the Zebulunite, died and was buried in Aijalon in the country of Zebulun. That's all it says about him. It doesn't say anything else about this guy, just that he lived, he judged for this long, and he died. And this is where he was buried. But it does give us the continuity. And then after him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, Pirathonite, judged Israel, and he had 40 sons and 30 nephews. So again, big family that rode on 60, that is 60 10 ascolts, so 70. So 40 sons, 30 nephews. There's 70 of them together. They're riding on these 70 different young donkeys, and he judged Israel 8 years. I like that these are in here because it is showing these big families. It is showing that, hey, the Israelites were cranking out the babies. They were definitely very large in number, and they had a high replacement. You have this fighting going on all this time, but their ability to replace through having all of these children is powerful. Like, they have really large families, and so even if you have thousands of them dying, they're replaced every generation very, very quickly. So anyway, he judged Israel 8 years, and then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died, and he was buried in Pirathon in the land of Ephraim in the mount of the Amalekites. And so that brings us to the end of the chapter. Again, not much here. Just some good solid history about what's going on with Israel in between Joshua and King Saul and whatnot. So definitely important to us. And then also a good idea of the chronology and the ability of the Israelites to have these large numbers that are talked about. And what that really does is that establishes our ability to have faith in the numbers that we see, rather than having to go in and try to, well, no, that's not really reasonable. Let's just arbitrarily change things up that we read. We don't need to do that. Just trust that what the Bible has is accurate. And then we can do some textual comparisons if there is a discrepancy, and find out if there was like a textual variant or something like that. But for the most part, when you have this consistency of these large numbers, then you can see that those numbers aren't made up, and we don't have to arbitrarily go in and change them. So anyway, thank you for joining me for this video, as short as it was, and we will move into Judges chapter 13 next time. As always, if you have any questions or comments, I look forward to those, and we will see you next time. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publication presentation.